final table's been set. Elton Sang is going to be coming back tomorrow, Randy, would you believe? Chip leader.
In this episode of Weekly Poker Hand, we are at the final table, heads up, in a $50,000 buy-in turbo bounty tournament presented by Triton Poker. In this hand, Brian Kim playing 16 big blinds deep with a big blind ante in play. He opts to limp with the 10-4 offsuit. You may ask, why? Well, he has to put in half a big blind to try to win 3. When you have to put in half a big blind to try to win 3, and you have position, you need to play pretty much any 2 cards. Brian knows that. He limps. Over to Jonathan Jaffe, poker coaching coach extraordinaire. Make sure you check out his content on my training site, pokercoaching.com. He opts to check the Queen-6 offsuit, which is also perfectly fine and reasonable. Let's head to the flop.
3.87 million up top in that one. Some huge storylines potentially emerging in that Triton Invitational, but for now, our attention on event number 2.
Well, Brian Kim going to bet on the button here. This is a limp pot.
Is it just over in hand number 1, Randy?
I mean, he's just
3 on the turn,
10.
and Brian.
He just has 10
and
high.
Brian just goes
How
for
can he
it.
possibly lose his chips?
The flop comes King of Diamonds, 6 of Spades, 2 of Spades. Jonathan Jaffe has a pair. Brian Kim has nothing. Jonathan Jaffe, out of position, opposite check. Brian Kim, not afraid. He goes 200,000 into the 600,000 pot with his nothing. Which, you know, to be fair and heads up, could just be fine. Especially on uncoordinated boards, most players are going to overfold a little bit to small bets. That said, Jonathan Jaffe will not. He gets in there, he battles hard, he is one of the greatest heads-up players to ever live. You can expect him to stick around. I think in this spot, if I was in Brian Kim's shoes, I probably would just check it back and use this hand as a turn and river bluff. And instead, if I had the 10-4 with a spade, I would be way more inclined to bluff the flop. Typically, you want to be bluffing with hands that have some potential to improve to a hand that can continue bluffing on the turn. And if you have a backdoor flush draw, that gives you just a little bit more equity. So I don't think this is any sort of like giant blunder to bet here with the 10-4, but I think you're probably going to be better off just checking it back and using this one as a turn and or river bluff. Whatever. He goes 200K. Jonathan Jaffe with his middle pair has a very easy call. Let's head to the turn.
It's not possible.
Okay. 3 on the turn,
Okay.
Randy.
But
We
he
got
just
4.
has a gutter ball, okay?
I mean, listen.
Just a gutter ball.
We're not betting 10 high on the flop to then not barrel off here. We unblock spades, we unblock diamonds.
And he can put a lot of pressure on 2x, right? 6x as well. Some overcards would drop off from river. Maybe he hit his hand. He's going to reach for more chips. As it stands now, Jaffe, of course, will be uncomfortable with just mid-pair. But there is a lot of draws that you mentioned that do exist that he wants to try to pick off and keep him honest.
It's a sizable turn barrel from Kim. 70%. SPR going to the river would be
Call.
bang on 1. Should JJ call, which he does. 2.4 in the middle. With 2.4 back. I wonder if Kim continues on a non-spade, non-diamond
The
river.
turn is the 3 of diamonds, giving Brian Kim a gut shot. That's better than nothing. Jonathan Jaffe checks. Brian Kim goes 700,000 into the 1.7 million pot. He's starting to ramp it up now. He's essentially saying, I am very polarized, which you will be in this spot. In this situation when there are 2 flush draws available, he's going to have a lot of high equity draws to get to bluff, and he can value bet with probably a hand like ace-6 and better, maybe queen-6 and better. I think those hands can be very, very happy value betting in this situation. Now you might say, would he have any of those hands in his pre-flop limping range? And yes, he definitely will. He's going to have plenty of kings. He'll have some pairs. And he also has a lot of high equity draws. So I love a bet in this scenario. The question becomes, should he be bluffing with some really junky hands like the 10-4 in the spot? And I think it's probably fine. Notice in this scenario, he's going to get called a decent chunk of the time by flush draws, and those are going to miss on the river, and he's going to be able to bluff those out. Notice he does not have diamonds or spades in his hand, which is fine. I mean, you have to realize you're going to get called a lot on the turn, but when you get called kind of wide on the turn with unpaired hands, you're going to have to be looking to bluff those off on the river. Plus, he has a gut shot, so I like this. Notice in this situation, you would think if you were in Brian Kim's shoes, if you bet the turn and get called, you have almost no equity or relatively little equity. Turns out 16% is a real number. Sometimes he ends up with the best hand. So I think this bet's fine. Jonathan Jaffe, he still has a pair. He's not folding. Let's head to the river.
Well, the front door flush does get there.
It's actually one of the best cards to consider barreling again.
Really? Why is that, Randy?
On the river, the ace of spades, Jonathan Jaffe checks. Before Randy Lou gives us the answer.
It's actually one of the best cards to consider barreling again.
What do you think? Why is this river one of the best cards for Brian Kim to continue bluffing on? Is it because he has more ace-x in his range when it goes limp check pre-flop? Is it because he could have spades that would bet the turn and then get there on the river? Or is it because Jaffe's range should be relatively weak? Take a second, think about it, and let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, click the like and subscribe button, please.
Because you have more ace-x's in your range
Right.
when you limp. You also have the spades to multi-barrel, you know, the turn. Your opponent's hand range is weak. They don't have that many ace-x. 6x's would be quite scared. I wouldn't fault him if he follows through. And also, when your opponent check calls flop and turn, you reduce their spade combos a little bit, right? Because if it's like a weak spade draw, they might not call the turn with just high card.
Wow,
Brian
he's
Kim,
going for
yeah,
it.
trying for it.
Hand number one.
The answer is all of the above. In this scenario, Brian Kim should have more ace-x in his range than Jonathan Jaffe, because, at least in GTO world, which is where I presume these players are living to some extent, Brian Kim's going to shove a lot of his ace-x offsuit pre-flop, but he's going to limp with a lot of suited aces. That's just good, strong GTO poker. Make sure you check out the poker coaching app. We have all sorts of heads-up range charts with an ante in play. You'll see lots of suited aces limping. Jonathan Jaffe, though, will shove all in with a lot of ace-x, both offsuit and suited. So Jonathan Jaffe has almost no ace-x in his range. Now you may say, would Brian Kim bet the flop and turn with any ace-x? Maybe, maybe not. But they're at least possible for him to have. Next, would Brian Kim barrel with spades? Would he bet the flop and the turn with a flush draw? Of course, that's perfectly logical. So Brian Kim's going to have a decent amount of flushes in his range. And finally, Jaffe's range that would check call the flop and check call the turn just got way worse on the ace river. Notice Jaffe would very likely raise a king on the flop and or turn. So if he has worse than a king, it means he has something like a 6 or a 3 or a 2. And those just got a whole lot worse. So all that combined makes this an excellent spot for Brian Kim to continue betting. And bet he does. He rips it all in. Let's see if Jaffe can find the hero call
Of this heads-up match. And Brian Kim has come out all guns blazing. Stabbed flop. Picked up a gut shot on the turn.
Call.
Wow, calls so fast. We have a champion.
Hand number one, Randy.
Congrats, man.
Jonathan Jaffe puts on the cape with third pair by the river.
Spicy hand. Yeah.
Really took no time at all there, really. All things considered, just calling Brian Kim down correctly.
Somehow, some way, Jonathan Jaffe gobbles this one right up. Easy call, scoop a loop the pot, no trouble. And he wins the tournament. Trying to figure out logically why would Jaffe just snap it off here? He probably doesn't think Brian Kim's going to bet the turn with too many flush draws, unless it's the ace-high flush draw exactly, or ace-king. So those are possible, but not all that likely. Next, he probably recognizes that while Brian Kim could have the spade flushes, he could also have the diamond busted flush draws. And notice Jaffe does not have any diamonds, so he does not block the logical bluffs, or some of the potentially logical bluffs, which is a good thing for Jaffe. And finally, Jaffe probably recognizes he does not have a whole lot of king X or ace X in his range. Meaning, if he doesn't have much king X or ace X, and he's going to have some flushes but not a ton, this queen 6 might be one of the best hands he can possibly have. And when you're getting 2-to-1 pot odds, meaning you only need to win 33% of the time or so, if you have a hand that's near the top of your range, you just have to find the call. Jonathan Jaffe does it. He recognizes it, and he is rewarded with the title. Thanks for watching.